Thank you for having me. My name is Bobby Gray. I was born in Western Tennessee, Blue Diamond Coal Company coal camp. My father worked all his life for Blue Diamond. We moved to Leatherwood, Kentucky in 1952, and my dad worked in the company store and service station. My mother did too. And I spent my boyhood days from age 10 to getting out of college at Leatherwood. I have very strong feelings about the community and how it blessed me, how the coal company blessed me, and how the people were. When Leatherwood was sort of like compared to the other coal camps, to others that I lived in as a kid, was like a very modern situation in that it was new. Everything was new about it. It was isolated, though, in that people needed a place like homes and grocery stores and entertainment places, and that was what Blue Diamond provided with the coal camp. One must remember that these coal camps were developed in isolated areas. Roads were muddy and dirty. They were hard to get to. Leatherwood coal camp was at the head of the Kentucky River drainage basin, and it was hard to get to, so people had to have a place to live, and that's what the coal company did. They built about 330 houses. The houses were somewhat segregated into salary people and into hourly people. The salary people houses were white in color and had a bathroom, and the hourly people's house were gray and had an outhouse. And these houses were 4 rooms. The hourly people and the salary people was 5. The community was basically isolated from the area. It was 30 miles to Hazard. Most of that was a dirt road in my boyhood days. The other communities around, like Hyden, going the other direction, was a very poor dirt road. Going to Harlan was the same way, going to Cumberland. So you had to have all the amenities that you needed to get your groceries, your entertainment, and items like that the coal company furnished. One of the things that Blue Diamond did was, at the time, was they used natural stone to build 3 large buildings that were about 4 stories in height that housed all the facilities to support the community. You did not need to leave the community for all your basic needs. The school was built by the coal company, and so during the times that we had no TVs back then, and I'm talking about the late 40s and 50s, and it was the mid-50s before we got TVs. So, and when we did get TVs, we had limited programming, so there was no need for us to be, as kids are doing today, on their iPhones or computers or such like that. We got out and In the summer, we played outside, all kinds of outdoor games. In bad weather, we played inside on various board games, from basic checkers to Monopoly and all those types of board games that were available at the time. In the winter, we enjoyed our sleigh riding on the hills, especially one hill that we call Store Hill, near the main complex of the store. One of the things about the store was it was, like I said, 4 stories high. The bottom was like at its time, a very modern, like supermarket with a meat market, all the vegetables and canned goods and checkout areas, and even worked as a 14, 15-year-old kid bagging groceries and carrying out to the people's cars when they would come and shop. I did that some after school and on Saturdays. And the next floor on the store had, we call it the dry goods and hardware area. You could buy clothing, from shoes to shirts and pants, and then the hardware, you could get all your pots and pans and things like that. Then you went on up to the 3rd floor and you had household goods and stuff. You could get refrigerators, stoves, whatever you needed to set up a housekeeping for the home. One of the other main buildings was the first building that was built was a warehouse. It was, again, made out of the native stone, and it was a 2-story type building, and it initially served as the first store and support for the mine or for the people in the community until the other buildings were built. And later it became more of a mine supply storage area for small items and such like that. The other building was called the Y. A lot of people ask why in the world it was called the Y. And that's an age-old question, I guess, that a lot of people have about why at Blue Diamond, at every coal camp that I lived in or ever was exposed to, there was a Y as part of the complexes that they built. And I think that came from, as I recall back looking at some old photographs of where I grew. I was born in East Tennessee in a coal camp called Western Tennessee of Blue Diamonds. And I can recall on that photo, it had YMCA. And we probably go back to years ago that people went to places in towns. There was a YMCA that people could stay overnight and such. And that's my understanding. The one in Western also had a sort of a boarding house where people could stay as well. So maybe that's where the Y came from, because it not only had the boarding, it had the restaurant, the theater, the barber shop, the pool room, and things like that. The one at Leatherwood, really the lower level floor had pool hall, had a office for an eye doctor. It came once or several times a month that you could go get your eyes checked and so on. It had the post office. It had a lot of storage for the coal company. And the reason I'll diverse a little bit about the storage was the coal company bought everything in bulk. You got to recall, as I indicated early, roads were tough to travel back in those days. So you could bring it in by rail in boxcars. And as a young kid, I enjoyed getting paid to help unload those boxcars when they would come in. I recall that in the wintertime we enjoyed unloading a boxcar that had jelly in it because it would come from Alabama, right from the factory. It was loaded, or the canning place, and it would still be warm, and we enjoyed those in the wintertime. They bought motor oil in bulk. I know that was tough on our hands to handle those big old cardboard boxes and unload those boxcars. They bought all kinds of vegetables and such like that, canned items that were already boxed, and they had storage for that there at the coal camp. The Y was building, not only did it have underground storage or lower ground storage for stuff that you might unload in the boxcar, from the boxcar, but the second floor housed, initially on your right was a barber shop, and at one time there was 2 barbers, I recall, working there, because back then you got your hair cut more often than we do now, I guess, and it seemed like they were always busy, the barbers were. Then there was a ladies, we called it the beauty shop, where the ladies got their hair fixed and whatever ladies would have at that time done to their hair and so on. And then there was a theater, and it was really neat. It had movies every night. You might have Monday and Tuesday, you'd have the same movie. Wednesday, Thursday, the same movie. Friday, a different one. Saturday, a different one. Sunday, a different one. One of the things that we looked forward to was at the movies was you could go to the Saturday or Sunday matinee for about 15 cents. And if you went to the night movie on Saturday or Sunday night, you paid a quarter. So also the movies were always introduced by a cartoon-like item before the main movie. Also, there was an item that we call the series that always went on, and it was like about a 10-minute little item that provided a person who was like the Lone Ranger almost, and the little 10-minute segment always ended with a dramatic situation that he was in. Was he going to fall over a cliff or get shot or whatever? And it ended. So you had to come back the next Saturday to see it start over and see the ending, and then it went for a few minutes again, and he got in another situation, and that ended. So that was another item that you look forward to going to the theater as a young kid. Each week you talked about what was going to happen and how he was going to get out of this item. The upper level of this building had a large meeting room where you could have Boy Scouts had their meetings, and Girl Scouts. Dance teachers came in. People like any activities like that were there. That was the meeting for the union meeting, or the salary people might have meetings there for some kind of training or such like that. There was a doctor's office, a full-time doctor at the coal camp, and his office were housed in the back end of this building, a very neat place. And over top of that was some apartments for the out-of-town officials of Blue Diamond that came in from Knoxville that would stay in those apartments when they came. I've sort of skipped over the one item that was the big item that jumped out. It was the Y restaurant. The Y restaurant was something that it was the old-fashioned bar, stool type counter place with the standard booths that you could set, and from the booth you could put a nickel or a dime in, and and select a song from an item at the booth that would play the jukebox. There was pinball machines there that we would play if you did have a nickel, and you could, if you were good enough, you could win additional games and play longer and longer on your nickel. But the Y was the place that you went when after school. It was a good place to see your friends after school. If you had a few cents, you might have a milkshake or a soft drink or something like that, but a good place to share some time with your friends. You might even dance a little bit. It was a neat little place to meet. It was a great place before or after going to the movie to get a hot dog or a hamburger, and on a Saturday after your movie matinee, and in the wintertime it was an excellent place to go after you did your sleigh riding off of Store Hill, and which was about a half a mile steep grade area that provided excellent sledding, and the kids would hang out there and build fires at the top of the slope and one at the bottom, and you would go down and warm up and pull your sled back to the top and go down again. Then after a certain period of time, you would wander over to the Y and get you a nice cup of hot chocolate, which would always feel so good to me. One of the things that we had in the coal camp, very few people had any materialistic things. We had limited financial items that we could do. We looked forward to things like the movie and a hot dog once a week or something like that. But the big thing we had was parents that loved us. They looked after us and our friends, and you were always welcome at the neighbor's house or your friend's house up the hollow there in the coal camp. There was about 330 houses there, and in 3 different hollows, and they all intersected at the 3-store complex area. I was fortunate enough to work at 16 years old, work at the coal lab, and the coal lab did analysis on the quality of the coal that they were shipping, and I was just a helper to one of the guys, and I got pretty good. He trained me very well. I could run the basic BTU machine that determines the heat value of the coal, the sulfur machine, and the ash content machine. Those were 3 key components that they needed on the coal and such like that. There was always a need to, they were always behind at the lab. So anytime that you wanted to work, or as many hours as you could work, is amazing how many hours I worked there, and I made a reasonable wage that allowed me to have, as a young kid in high school there, dollars that I could have, and that many of the kids did not have the opportunity to have that opportunity to have a job after school and in the summers. That progressed into, as soon as I got 18, I was able to join the engineering department and began working with a survey crew doing underground spad setting work and levels and so on like that related to the mapping and such of the mines. I then was able to, my mother always told me the way I'd go to college I would receive the Blue Diamond Coal Company Bottomman Scholarship that would pay my way to the University of Kentucky to get my engineering degree. The Bottomman family had what they called a slot at the University of Kentucky, that they provided a scholarship for one of their employees' sons or daughters. I don't recall any daughters ever going. It was always a son and one of their employees. But this slot was only filled when that person graduated. Now, Blue Diamond gave financial support to very deserving students in assisting them in their financial needs of going to college. And so the year that I graduated from high school in 1959, that slot was not open. And I must say something about that slot. That slot was provided in memory of the Bottomman, the founding father's son of Blue Diamond Coal Company. His son, about 6 months after he graduated from the University of Kentucky in 1944, he was shipped off to the Pacific as a young lieutenant, and he won the Congressional Medal of Honor, but gave up his life. And in memory of him, they provided a slot at the University of Kentucky where that financially they treated you like you were him financially. As I indicated, that slot wasn't available when I graduated in 1959, so some way my parents, and with my working, I went to Cumberland College for 1 year, which was really a blessing for me because our schools at that time did not prepare you very well for college and had very limited coursework. The one thing that I had going for me was I was outstanding in math, but very poor in English. And so God knew that I could not have went to UK and made it right off to the start. So that's why that slot wasn't open. In my feelings, I feel that the good Lord meant that I should go to Cumberland College, where I was able to get my English out of the way and some of the basics, and be exposed and get my chemistry out of the way. And all the courses I took at Cumberland College in the 1 year down there was at the end of that 1 year down there, that slot became open at UK since the young fella graduated. And I was selected for that slot. And it provided, financially, it provided for everything that you needed, just like you were their son. Paid for the haircuts on your head, to the shoes on your feet, and put spending money in your pocket, and gave you a great summer job. And so actually I was able to have a nice car and while I was at UK. And as I indicated, I was very good in math, and that really supported my engineering efforts quite well. I had to hustle, study hard, and in the summers I got to come back and work at Blue Diamond at Leatherwood, and for several summers I did time studies on new mining machinery underground. Many people probably know that a time study, a guy with a stopwatch timing items, the worker did not like that. But in this case, I was timing the machinery and not the person. So I was somewhat welcome on the section, in the working section, and the workers, all the machinery was new machinery that I was doing the time studies on, that Blue Diamond was considering upgrading all their fleet of equipment. This was about 1961, 2 period, and the mine had been around about a dozen plus years, and so equipment was, new technology had came along, and there was a time to maybe upgrade, and they were studying the impact of the value of upgrading this. And that was where I got really exposed to the underground mining. Was the men treated me so well. They took care of me. They made sure that I was I was sitting in the right place underground with my stopwatch and clipboard and my note taking and such like that. They also had a chance that when the section was down for some reason, due to maybe there was steel track haulage at this mine, and once you filled all the rail cars up for your section, then the main machinery that I was studying, the load machine, was idle. So the men would go do what we would call dead work, housekeeping, do other things within the section to get it cleaned up and set up so that they could continue their mining. But they also played all the typical jokes on me. I recall, I'll share one with you, the load machine operator that I was doing the time study on, the big new machine he was running. The section was down, and he told me that we needed some rib stretchers. I think my ribs and such like that. I really didn't know what he hardly was talking about, but he said, run down to the dinner hole and talk to Mr. Blair. And down there, he was the mechanic electrician on the section, asked him to send the rib stretchers up here. So being a young greenhorn, I trot down the 300 or 400 feet to the dinner hole, and there's Mr. Blair at his toolbox, and I asked him where the rib stretchers are, and he looks around and he says, I can't find them, but he says, I think Mr. Spencer has them over on the other side, on the other side of the section. Mr. Spencer was the gentleman who shot the coal after they drilled it up, and then he would load it up with the powder, the dynamite sticks, and he would electronically detonate those sticks of dynamite. So I go across the section, and I see Mr. Spencer over there ready to wire up his little detonator unit that he would use. It was, I guess, a battery-powered type item that he would twist the handle, and it would give a electrical impulse out that would detonate the caps in the sticks of dynamite, and it would blow out. So when I get over there with Mr. Spencer, I say, Mr. Spencer, I'm looking for the rib stretchers. And so he says, well, I'll help you look for them here if you'll help me test this out real quick. Says, and he had this little generator-like thing with a couple little electronic places to put wires on, 2 little poles sticking up. He said, wet your fingers and stick them on these 2 items. Being very eager and greenhorn as I was, I wetted my fingers and stuck them on the poles. Mr. Spencer, he spins his little handle, and it shocks me the daylights out of me, or it shocks me slightly, and I jump back and want to know what in the world's going on. And doesn't laugh or joke or anything. He said, well, it's okay. We can war up and shoot this shot of coal. So then he tells me that we look around and we can't find the rib stretchers. And I go on, and I finally run into one guy who laughs and shares with me that they're pulling a joke on me. But I fell for many other of those greenhorn jokes that the workers would pull and on a young kid that was 17, 18 years old. And I gained a great respect for the men in that they always looked after me. They made sure that when I was underground, that if there was any bad conditions, they made sure that I was well protected from that, or so on like that. The coal camp, again, nobody really had anything more than the others. So we really had a lot of exposure to each other as kids, not only through school, but through our summer outings and everything. We had Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and conservation clubs and various other activities that were ongoing. And the churches, I must bring them into my thoughts, because the community was also, the young people were somewhat built around the church activities, in that, put it openly, that was a good way to go to the church activities, the youth activities that they had. You could meet the young ladies, and that was an incentive for a young guy like me to go and be involved in those various activities. And also, I was exposed to the Word of God. And I, at about 13, 14 years old, I accepted the Lord as my Savior, and I was baptized in the creek, and along with a couple of my other friends at the same time, several of us. So not only the church, there was 3 churches in the community, and they were very cooperative in their efforts, especially with the young people. So we had a community that pulled together in so many ways. We had the coal company provided all your needs through the company store. You didn't need to drive to some location to go to a supermarket. But again, the roads were so bad that you really couldn't think much about going. So when you got to the coal camp, you stayed there, and later on, the roads got upgraded. One of the incentives that Blue Diamond provided was that they, to get the roads upgraded, there was always promises from the various communities around, from Cumberland, Kentucky, about 18 miles away, that they would help get that road upgraded so that people could get to that direction. Over through Big Laurel to Harlan, they made promises. Hyden made promises, and Perry County and Hazard area made promises. But those promises did not seem to ever become a reality. So one year, Blue Diamond paid off their payroll for vacation. You got prepaid for 2 weeks vacation. They paid off in $2 bills. I meant to bring a picture today of that $240,000 worth of $2 bills that I have a picture of, that Blue Diamond wanted to show the local communities around the flow of the money. And about 3 weeks or 4 weeks after that, here comes Perry County in, from which is Hazard is the county seat for the coal camp, working and beginning their initial efforts to upgrade the road and pave the road, the 12 miles to Cornettsville at Route 7 so that you could get to Hazard in a logical manner instead of driving through the mud and grime and so on like that. The coal camp, as any coal company camp, reaches a certain period in time that you don't need a coal camp, because when you have road systems, people can commute in and live outside the coal camp. The reason the camp existed was you did not have the ability to commute in or live out some distance away at maybe near Hazard, Cumberland, Harlan, Hyden, and so on like that. So after the road system was built, people could live most anywhere and commute in. And in 1964, I think of Blue Diamond or Leatherwood being changing from one community to another community, in that the Blue Diamond decided to not renew the UMWA contract with the workers, and there became a major long-term strike. It just so happened that at that time in 1964 that the workers could easily go to Western Kentucky, where it had been large strip mining. The overburden ratios had got to the point that they were now needing to mine the coal using deep mine methods. So they were looking for underground workers. So there was you could almost think half the people just left all at once and went to Western Kentucky. Another group of them that may have decided that they would like to leave the coal industry could go north to the auto or the smokestack industries up north, and they migrated that way. So when the mine reopened after the strike, it reopened under the Southern Labor Union and rehired people, and many of the people came from the local communities now that the road systems were built and in place. So you did not really need a coal camp to house people. So the camp began to change or deteriorate and became, to me, two different periods that you got to think about Leatherwood. You got to think about what we, of my age, refer to as pre-strike coal camp and after-strike coal camp. That provides a dividing point in that the people pre-strike were more like pioneers and developed their kids and me. We developed our thinking of growing up somewhat with limited TV, limited access to a lot of things, but we had the friendship and the companionship of our friends and playmates and so on like that. After the coal camp, after the strike in 64 and 66, when it came back into operation full time, you had people who were commuting in, so you did not have the interaction of a community like you had before. You had, maybe people did move in, but they were somewhat in a time when you had TVs and other activities taking your time, and my parents lived there until 1983. My dad managed the company service station. My mother worked at the company store, and they both retired from Blue Diamond in 1983 and moved back to La Follette, Tennessee, near my birthplace, and where that they were their birthplace, and where many of the original workers came from Blue Diamond's East Tennessee operations to Leatherwood. I get to go every year to the Leatherwood reunion, which is held in La Follette, Tennessee, and I greatly enjoy it, meeting friends that I grew up with. Each year we find that we've lost another group that have passed away, and I'm looking forward in a few weeks, on September 15th, of returning to La Follette for a Saturday day with old friends that go back to that, most of them go back to that pre-60s time, and pre-strike time, and we're able to exchange old stories. We're able to share where our life pathways have taken us. I'm 76 years old. I'm still active in the mining industry. I am a professional engineer. I work for a major investment group out of Greenwich, Connecticut. I look mainly after 3 projects right now, one in Colombia, South America, one in the Czech Republic, and one in northern West Virginia, which is just a new project being designed and developed with a joint venture with a Korean steel company. And if it goes forward, it'll cost $500 million before the first lump of coal comes out of it. So I've been very blessed to be exposed to so many different types of mining activities. I've actually been involved with some copper, zinc through this investment group. I've been with them over 30 years, and I worked about 20 years with the operational group of another company. The coal industry has been good to me, still is, and I look forward to spending several more years involved in it. I guess it is my hobby now. I hope and pray that that our industry is able to continue competing. I know that coal is sort of a bad word, but technology has allowed us to build coal plants, power plants that can burn coal cleanly. But we do know that there is other methods that are coming along that will substitute for this. One of the areas that I've been mainly involved is in metallurgical coal that's used in the steel industry. And that's where my background is, and all the projects that I'm involved with are related to metallurgical coal for the steel companies. I thank you for your time, and wish everybody the best in the coal fields. Good day.
Very good, excellent.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it. I could see